Hi, we're talking today to Lieutenant Timothy McMillan, a retired law enforcement officer who's worked as a police officer, as a detective, as an investigator, and now as you're still an investigator, I guess. So it's because you're doing investigative journalism and you're a freelance writer. Tim, thank you for joining us and thank you for your service.
No, thank you, Jazz. It's a pleasure to be here. It's great to get the chance to finally talk to you.
Yeah, we've been in contact online, and that, like so many media relationships start these days. But I had been dying to speak with you. Um, the first thing I wanted to ask you, you spent a full career working in law enforcement. Now you're a freelance writer. I should have mentioned up front for everybody that you can read Tim's work at places like the War Zone, Vice, and Popular Mechanics. I'm doing all this from memory, so I'm flying without a net here.
You're doing great.
How does that happen? What's the transition from a lifetime in law enforcement
hmm
to now I'm a freelance writer?
well, the lifetime in law enforcement was kind of happenstance as well. To be honest with you, my whole life can be summed up by that, falling into stuff. Although, correct, about 16 years of the bulk of my adult life was spent in police work. Which before that, I'll be honest with you, I was in college. I couldn't decide if I wanted to be an astronomer or a research psychologist. I just want to solve mysteries. And space and the human mind were the biggest mysteries I could think of.
And they still
And
are.
correct. After two friends of mine, I was growing up in Savannah, Georgia. They were murdered in a home invasion. Just one of these really senseless acts, and it bothered me so much that's what, I decided I kind of two types of people in this world: those who say somebody needs to do something, and those who say I'm going to do something. And so, I turned 21 years old in the police academy because I wanted to do something. After about 16 years, I was my final rank was the lieutenant. I was the duty officer, assistant patrol commander, which really just meant I was whenever the administrative staff, so the patrol commander and the chief were off after hours, I was the guy. And
And
six
this was in
straight years.
Georgia?
Yeah, just outside Savannah, Garden City, Georgia. And So 6 years of that, I'll tell you, I really enjoy the work. I work with some of the finest individuals you'll ever meet. I really enjoyed what I did there. But my last 6 years, I was the nighttime duty lieutenant, so it was 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. And so, with a wife and little kids, it was like, okay, I had become a vampire. And I actually had a transition in there because I left policing in summer of 2018. And for about a year, I worked for a private law firm as an investigator and an intelligence analyst, kind of getting to see the other side. It was interesting. But just recently, I've always enjoyed writing. And so I was writing, even while I was in law enforcement, I was doing some different work on the side, especially because I was in my last couple of years were right then when you had a lot of the Ferguson stuff. There still is, but I was working in the time where there was considerable amount of tensions amongst the community, especially minority communities and law enforcement. And so, even my last couple of years of policing, I had kind of reached out to try to maybe see if we couldn't bridge that gap because the area I worked in. Was a predominantly minority. It was, our violent crime rate was about 300 points higher than Chicago. So we didn't work in Mayberry, but
Wow.
yeah, but it was a great experience. I'll tell you, I met people. I talked to people that a lot of a lot of people would be scared of. I just go out there and treat people like people. And so in doing that and learning, everybody's got a story. You began to see people as individuals, not just as where they're from, and you realize everybody's it was never personal. I tell people, I mean, you know, I never met a person who committed a crime that I felt like really wanted to, and what I mean by that is that if there was kind of a learned hopelessness. So I went out there, engaged the community, and then for the last couple of years tried to do that, both writing, public speaking, appearing in interviews and things.
So
And
you never
so
ran into any like Charlie Manson's,
I never ran into Charlie Manson. No, I mean, I
Or I mean anybody
definitely,
like him, somebody that's just abjectly evil. At least that's the impression I always had of him.
you know, I did. I mean, I saw some pretty evil things. I'll say that much. There was that's one of the things I always enjoyed about it is I always thought you got a really good intimate picture of what life is, and it's not always pretty. It is chaotic, and I've always been somebody to kind of go past just the veil and look past that, and so I saw people who did some really horrific things. Um, that doesn't make sense, but you also got this kind of idea that in a lot of ways, I'll say again, and it doesn't happen for everybody because a lot of cops, it ends up wearing on them. But I learned an appreciation for chaos of life and that
Mm.
enjoying the good things in it. Um, in my first year in policing, I tell people, this was before cell phones were all popular. This is 2002, three. And we had a couple who pulled over on the side of the road to check a map. They were coming to move to the area, and a tree literally fell on their car and killed them. And I remember thinking, like, there's nothing. I mean, they did everything right. They pulled over. I mean, who would think a tree? But it was this kind of realization that, a lot of us spend our life being afraid to take chances for ourselves, be happy, or just living scared in a sense. And the bottom line is, life is a scary, chaotic place. Enjoy it. Don't worry about whether the tree's going to fall on you, but don't hold yourself back. And so,
Sure.
um, yeah, I mean, there was definitely some traumatic things. I've been on scene for fatal officer involved shootings and stuff. So there was a lot of I got a little bit of everything, but I definitely walked away feeling good. If that
That's
makes
good
any
to hear.
sense.
That makes me hopeful because I have friends,
Hmm.
I should say relatives that are a lot younger, two of whom have gone into the military and two of whom have gone to the police academy. And the second two, it's kind of wearing on them already. But we're not here to talk about me and my
Okay.
family.
Yeah.
So the other big change for you recently, I understand you're talking to me from Germany. If it's not too personal, and if it is, tell me and we'll cut this out. What prompted that?
No, no, no. I'm sorry. And yeah, you're right. I got off on a pig trail talking about life and policing. But yes, ult- ultimately, this past summer, my wife works for the Department of Defense, and she had an opportunity to transfer to Germany here. And so we have three small children. And, at first I was like, well, I was still working at the law firm. I'm like, well, what am I going to do? And at this point, I'm actually already starting to write for the War Zone. Tyler had kind of, me and him had connected, and he was like, man, you should come write for us. And so I was already starting to write a little bit, which has always been my passion. I've written 90% of a book I just haven't finished yet in 2 years. And so the first
Welcome to the
initial,
club.
right, right, yeah, that's everybody I know. It seems like that. And my wife said, because Uncle Sam, I'll say, can be generous to their overseas employees. And so, we had an opportunity in terms of housing and all these things where, we could afford to do it because that was a big scary jump as a freelance writer. I like writing about things I want to write about and really throwing myself into investigating and bringing information out to the public. But that can be inconsistent. And she said, well, you can write. And so we ended up this past end of August moving here to Germany, all the way across the big Atlantic, and so now that's what I do full time is writing for Popular Mechanics, Vice, the War Zone. It depends on what the story is, but that's what prompted it, and hopefully here coming up. After the first of the year, I'll be able to share some of the other stuff a little different than what I have been writing about because I'm a history nerd and there's a lot of history here and
That's something I
some really.
wanted to comment on because having read a bunch of your stuff now, you're in a very
Mhm.
different field than me. We tend to do more newsy, quicker hits, opinion pieces, things like that don't get that long. When you write something, pretty
Mhm.
much all of it, you're digging into it, you're researching, you're talking to people, and you're writing really long pieces.
Mhm.
And that seems like a very different experience. And that brings us to the main topics that I was going to talk about with you. Um, what got you interested in investigating some of the more fringe stuff that I've been writing about now?
Sure.
And I know we're going to eventually talk about UFOs, which is always fun for everybody and probably what a lot of people tune in for. But you cover a lot of stuff with the government that could, it's all factual, but it could feed into some people's conspiracy theory ideas and a lot about tech too. So have you always had that interest in tech and all the ways it, kind of wraps itself around society?
Yeah, in a way, and I won't say that I'm a techie as much as I am. I like investigating. I like uncovering things, and I do tend to kind of focus on the defense or intelligence community sector, stuff. And oftentimes technology is that stuff that's so interesting. Um, for me, it's kind of for me, it's interesting because you're dealing with stuff oftentimes that's classified or people want to keep secret for good reasons, and I respect that. And equally, though, I kind of feel, now that I'm not in law enforcement, I still firmly believe in the Constitution and freedoms, and so it's this freedom of the press that you try to mitigate that fine line between national security and public information, because the cold hard fact of it is that some of the greatest technological breakthroughs emerge in the defense industry, and so it's this really, because you realize, wow, and this super jet that's being built, or you're looking into the SR-72, the replacement for the Blackbird, this hypersonic thing, and you're like, wow, that's great, and then you kind of realize, well, they're weapons of war, and so that's been one of the interesting things living in Germany is you see the after effects of war from people here. You see different perspectives of a horrific war that occurred here, and so it's this weird kind of balance between extreme innovation, um, secrecy, that's interesting to me, and extreme technological breakthroughs. And so, the biggest extremes that we'll see, even, the communication devices we're using on here, they very often emerge out of the defense tech sector. And so it's kind of, can we chip away at that? Because, you and I aren't going to be able to fly the hypersonic, weightless anti-gravity bullet to Mars that's tucked away unless it comes out.
Yeah, but when it comes out, it's going to come out most likely from a place that is, as you sort of inferred,
Yeah.
it's going to get weaponized before anything else. I mean, let's look back in history and remember that when the discovery of nuclear energy was first made and was coming out of the theoretical stage, we built a bomb 6 years before we had a functional nuclear power reactor. We'd already dropped two of them on somebody before we had a functional reactor.
Yeah.
So that seems to be the way of the world. Speaking of government secrecy, one of your recent articles, I believe it was for Vice, was all about SAP
Mhm.
special access projects,
Mhm.
and you go through material about the different levels of classification, the different security clearances that people get. I'm not going to give you my takeaway on that. What was your motivation in writing that article? What did you think people need to know about that subject?
Well, that was the first one. It was actually the war zone. That was one of the first
Oh, war
pieces
zone.
I
Sorry,
did.
my apology.
No, no worries. I'm glad you read it. I had to throw that in for Tyler. I don't need him fussing at me. But it is one of those areas where, and you will find this a lot once you start dealing into the defense sector or government in general, is there's considerable number of misconceptions. There's these weird balance of truths, and so it was. I would say for the mainstream public, digestible public who's interested in it, um, they don't want to read a textbook on special access programs or do what I did when I wrote that article, which was just be crazy and read like 800 pages of DoD policy and actually took the Center for Security Excellence class. You can take it and not get credit for it, but it's the same class contractors have to take when they get into a SAP. And so to get an idea of it, because I wanted to know, what's the truth, what is maybe our beliefs that are oftentimes formed on past instances as well. There were some extreme examples there. And so the motivation for that piece was really to, I will say, is just as much for my own education. What does it mean? Because you hear a lot of crazy things. And this was a time when I was starting to look into the UFO world. And the term SAP is very big in there. And it's thrown around as like this carte blanche that, oh, well, that's 10 levels above top secret, and it's and you're like, you learn that to some degree that's not true. But it is also, it's fascinating for me. My academic background is actually in cognitive psychology and mathematics, believe it or not. That's my college is in. And so people fascinate me. And so the ability to compartmentalize this information, it's a fascinating process. The ability that you can, you could have two different contractors or two different groups of people working on the same program, different components, and have no clue. I mean, that's how you mentioned the Manhattan Project. I mean, that's how they were able to maintain that secrecy. And truthfully, one of the first things that motivated me into that whole genre was being fascinated, the psychology side of me, being fascinated about how do the individuals who engage in extreme secret programs like this, how do they mitigate that psychologically? Because keeping secrets is actually, it has a negative effect on us, neurologically. I mean, our psychology, it doesn't do good things for us. And so I was very curious of how, because I have some friends that work in different industries where they carry, or within the government, they carry top secret clearances, and they can't talk about what they do to their spouse. That fascinated me, because that, I could share with my wife what I did at work today. These guys can't talk about any of it, and it was just that kind of human side of it that gets lost in the mix is what I've always tried to attack in any of this stuff, because the idea of SAP, or the government special access program, it's a very broad kind of industrial term, and you already have like this huge picture of a building and it looks ominous, but I try to get to the nitty gritty at the individuals that work in it, because that's ultimately, I think I may have said in that SAP piece, they're structured to do great things or horrible things. It depends on the individuals in it. And I want to know the oversight.
Let me, if you don't mind, let me tie this question into one that you already brought up, and I knew we were going to talk about anyhow, because this is a great jumping off point. And correct me if my facts are wrong. I know you've already investigated this. The ATIP program, the one that started all this craziness back in December of 2017 when it was revealed, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Project, whatever it was, that Luis Elizondo was the head of, or never involved in, depending who you ask. Harry Reid was the one who thought that up originally, Senator Harry Reid of Nevada, now retired. And as I recall from the background documentation, he tried to get ATIP declared an SAP, but that was refused. It never happened. I assume it was still secret at some level, but it wasn't an actual deep down in the bin SAP program. That was a project that he wanted put in place because our military was becoming aware of incursions by some things or someone that appeared to have incredible technology. And if it wasn't us, it might be the Russians, it might be the Chinese, it might be the aliens. How is that not a special access project?
Well, it all, I mean, this is the thing, and that I said about it in terms of kind of this understanding of government is you really have to look at government as very much like an onion, meaning, as you peel away, you're going to peel away at all these furrows and everything. Before you ever get to the core, your eyes are going to be burning with rage, and you're going to be weeping uncontrollably because it's so confusing. And so when it comes to the establishment of a special access program, there are a outline, defined set of procedures. I mean, that's one of the things I think people don't realize is that it takes about 90 signatures and a couple of committees to decide whether they're going to move the bathrooms. Like, nothing is easy. And so, um, you know, in terms of why that wasn't categorically a SAP, it ultimately would have been that whoever the SAP central office was that they applied to, and I think that they were trying to run it out of the Defense Intelligence Agency, is who they have to do it to. And in fact, that letter was sent to, I don't know what, sorry, Siri decided to start having a chat. Evidently, the NSA wants me to be quiet now. No.
That's why I never enabled Siri or any of those projects, because they're always listening.
Right.
You're laughing. I'm not joking.
Well, and there's a considerable amount of truth to that. Certain things, the capabilities are there. I'll say that much. But in terms of why, I guess your question is, why was that not considered a special access program? Is because
Right.
it
sounds like it should be,
well, because it didn't have the formalized processes that are categorically a special access program, and which would have established all of these set little components, and then you would have had a SAP oversight coordinator. It would have fallen under the SAP oversight committee. It would have fallen under all of these different individuals would have brought it in, and the whole term, special access program means just that. It's special access. So if you didn't have tickets to get into that program, it would secure it. It's more of a formalization of a secret program or a secret study or something that they want to keep secret, and you're adding a formal component into it along with budgetary controls and various things like that. But that equally doesn't mean that something like ATIP couldn't have been a de facto SAP. And in fact, that happens all the time. And I'll give you my opinion. I think is largely what's going on right now with the debate and confusion over ATIP in general. Was it, you don't know every day something changes. It was real. They looked at UFOs. Never mind. It wasn't real. They didn't look at UFOs. You don't know. And a part of that becomes into how formalized of a special access program it is. And the idea that sections, even within agencies and government, still segments things unofficially, that shouldn't surprise anyone. That is, that's something that came out at the end of Nixon's presidency. There was a ungodly number of agencies who were using restricted classifications as their own de facto SAP program because they didn't have SAPs at the time. And so the very long answer to your question was they didn't put all of the components in place to make it a formalized special access program.
Gotcha. Now you mentioned something during that long and winding answer that came up recently. We already touched on ATIP, and I sort of inferred or made a reference to this earlier. All along it was, this program that's going to look for UFOs, whether they're alien or Russian or ours or whatever. But that was the purpose of it. And then just in the last week or so, the Pentagon, the same person who personally sent me an email on the subject before saying exactly all that stuff, came out with a new statement they sent over to John Greenwald of Black Vault and said, no, we were never looking at UFOs. Mm-hmm. And Harry Reid talked to a reporter, George Knapp, and just said, they can say what they want, but that's my program, was UFO. Give me your impression, because you've been investigating all this. Well, first of all, were they investigating UFOs, in your opinion? And second, what's going on with the Pentagon? Why would they do this back and forth switching up stuff? Does it make any sense to you? Because it sure doesn't.
Yeah. Yes. And I'll be happy to answer the second question. The first one, and the only reason I hate doing this is being vague or deferring on the second question about what exactly was ATIP, what exactly is still going on, or what some clarity of it is. That's actually something I'm working on right now. That I tell people to be patient, because that's I want to try to, whatever I put out there, I want to say is very clear, concise, and I stand by it as being accurate and credible. But I am working right now and so, I give the publications who offer me the opportunity to put it out there in the mainstream that preference. And quite frankly, I'll tell you right now, I don't have a conclusive answer to that. But in terms of the second part of that, is why are you seeing so, it seems like, it was just September, they said, yeah, it's, or maybe it was May or July-ish that they said, well, yeah, they looked at a little UFOs, maybe they didn't. One of the things that's very important for people to realize is, going back thousands of years, um, there's a phrase that exists for a reason. It's an unwritten rule of warfare, which is you don't execute your enemies, emissaries, or messengers when they come to bring you a message. So it's a unwritten rule that you don't shoot the messenger. And in these instances, the Pentagon spokespersons are just that. They're just messengers, meaning they're not working in any of these programs per se. They have portfolios.
I have tweeted the exact same thing that you're saying, almost word for word. I didn't want to give you the impression. I'm not blaming Susan Go or any of the other spokespeople, but when they come out and give an answer to a question that they've been asked, or issue a press release, issue a statement, it's not because Susan Go's normal job is working in Area 51 on UFOs. Excuse me. Nor is she a general. She's giving the information, the answers that she was given, and putting them out there. Certainly not her fault. But somebody in the Pentagon told her to say that. So that's more my point.
Yeah. Okay. No, absolutely. I got you. Yeah. And you're right. I'm probably clarifying a point that we both agreed on. It's more the general public that likes to get the pitchforks out. But why is that going on? I don't know, other than it doesn't surprise me. And the reason I say it doesn't surprise me is that I have told people, I'm willing to look, and you please point me to that one example, but point me to the example in 72 years when the United States government has ever been able to give clear or concise information regarding the UFO topic, period. I mean, they have always had an issue with it. They have always been uncomfortable with it. What that reason is, I don't know. There's a lot of speculation for that. Is there a cover up? Is there, is there the crashed, flying saucers tucked away at Area 51? There's many very reasons. The reasons that those kind of ideas, we're going to fill in information where blanks exist. So they've never seemed to be able to be comfortable giving information, which is interesting in and of itself. And it's hard to interpret who Mrs. Go is speaking to when she goes to look for information, who she's not. And the other side of that is I tell people pay close attention to what is actually being said, because those spokespersons will answer exactly what you ask them and nothing more and nothing less. But they're skilled wordsmiths.
We both know that, yes. Mm-hmm. They can be very careful about how they phrase their answers, yes.
They're trained that way. And so I urge people, I just reread it not long ago, her statement about what the ATIP or OSTAP program was, and it said investigating foreign technological advances in the aerospace industry over 4 years. And so I just yesterday emailed her and said, can you please provide me what is the accepted or identified definition of foreign in your statement and in their mission box? Because it sounds funny because you think foreign means, another foreign government.
Foreign country, yes.
But they will play on those words. And point being, to them, hey, we're free and clear. I've not lied to anyone. It is foreign as in unknown. It is unknown foreign. It is foreign to what we know to be something to be. And do I know that she's playing on words there? No. But I will say in other statements, just recently, working on an article that should be out next week for Popular Mechanics, looking through what she said to me. And that's why I caution all, anybody who especially with this topic, who, whether they're a journalist or just curious, who reaches out, pay attention to what they're saying, because one of the statements that it'll be out in the next piece, but She acknowledged that incursions, happen across all of the departments in the Department of Defense. So all branches of the military, and so these are occurring by everyone. And these investigations involve multiple and varied agencies within the government. Blah 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 blah. Well, when she's saying that, she's very specific when she says Department of Defense. So we have multiple things going on in the Department of Defense, meaning mostly the three branches. You got the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. But when she says agencies, that includes the agencies outside of the DoD. And so those little word plays. So what she's now saying is the door is open for the FBI, Homeland Security, the CIA, all of these different people. Same thing when I know a lot of people, because my last article with Popular Mechanics covered that, some of these enlisted witnesses told me they viewed a longer video than what has been released in the 2004 Nimitz event. Longer than the minute and 16-second video that's out there that showed a lot.
I wanted to pause you for a second because you actually hit on my next question. I wanted to point out to people, and we will link to these articles in the show notes for this interview. But you did one. It was called "The Witnesses" for Popular Mechanics, and
Yes.
you actually got to speak to quite a few of the people who were involved in the 2004 Nimitz encounter. Now, tying that into our current conversation, what was your level of confidence after talking to them as opposed to dealing with government drones and things? Do you think that we have witnesses that are coming out and giving us information we can really embrace and rely on?
I will say that in my conversations with the enlisted guys, and so these were, all of them were on the USS Princeton, and one was from the USS Nimitz. All of them that I spoke with, and this is me personally and interacting with them, but then it interjects my professional background. I was trained in both basic and advanced interrogator. I taught interrogations and interviews. I was a certified instructor, so I taught domestic law enforcement and intelligence agents up to the federal level. And so, in my opinion, in interviewing them in those capacities, there was never a time when I felt like they were deceptive, ever. There was never a time that I thought they were lying, ever. I know that some of their accounts have been, there's some contention with some people about them, but my general opinion in them is they were absolutely honest. They were absolutely saying exactly what they saw. And I think that they're highly trained, highly credible witnesses to the point where I remember being very, very impressed. Gary Voorhees, who was the Aegis operator on the Princeton. I mean, the guy, like he's the computer guy, or the systems guy that maintains those. He was rattling off capabilities and names of systems he hadn't worked on in 15 years. So these are very intelligent individuals. They're salt of the earth. Like these are the guys you want to be your neighbors. So there was nothing about them that I think that anybody should dismiss what they're saying whatsoever. More importantly,
I tend to agree. For what it's worth, I haven't interviewed any of them personally, but I've watched, I think, every interview they've done, and just going by the lingo they use, the terminology, the tech that's involved. I served for several years on an aircraft carrier myself, and those guys, are absolutely people who worked in a carrier task group. I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm going to run out of your time before very long, so I hate to cut that off, but I did have another question that ties into this whole subject. I'm not going to ask you the boring question. Do you think that that the Tic Tacs and everything are extraterrestrials? Because nobody knows yet. We're not going to find out. Because of your articles that we've been discussing, the question I really wanted to ask you was, let's go for a very short walk down hypothetical lane. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, with nothing to back this up, that it does turn out that there's some sort of extraterrestrial intelligence directing some of these objects that we've seen making incursions into our airspace, and that becomes, or maybe perhaps it's even already known somewhere that is the case. Would you personally, and again, I'm just asking for an opinion, would you consider that information to be, what's the right phrase I'm looking for? Would you consider that a national security threat if that got out to the public? Do you think the government would be justified if if it had happened, we're not saying it has,
Hmm.
that they had that information and knowingly withheld it from the public, would you personally see a justification for saying, no, we can't tell everybody that?
Man, what a good question.
I don't mean the nuts and bolts
Yeah,
details. If they figured out some of their tech, they don't have to tell us. That would certainly be classified. But just the
right.
existence. Do
Just
you
the
think that's a national
existence.
security threat?
Oh man, wow, what a great question.
Thank you.
Um, because
That's what
yeah, because
we're
that yeah, yeah. What a great question because just the mere existence, if people knew that there was an inhuman species that there was a they could fly around with impunity. They really, I think the scary part of that, where you're talking about a national security, and is that there's who they really don't care what you got going on. Like they're in control. Like there's never been any evidence to me that they, oh, sorry, was this your airspace? Um, and so, it would shift into kind of a sociological thing. Like, would it create fear, chaos? Um, and man, that's such an unknown that I'm not sure. We all say it, and I see it a lot. We see it on Twitter and everything. Disclosure, everything, and it's one of these things that's like, very rarely is Christmas morning always exactly what you wanted. And so, does any hiccup in that? Meaning it's kind of like the old Independence Day movie. The aliens are here, and then they're blowing up buildings. Well, disclosure wasn't so good. You know, um, gosh, I think that it would, undeniably, I think it would change the world. It would
Me
change
too.
the world view. It's just such an unpredictable thing, but at the same time, and that I'm gonna throw myself into my psychology background because this kind of got me into it too. Is that I think that human beings inherently are hardwired. You can see it even pre-Homo sapien, before the development of the prefrontal cortex, where there's this belief that there's something else, or you see a religious belief or whatever. There is this belief that there's a something else, whether it's spiritual, immaterial, and something else is always there. I mean, it seems to just be ingrained from when we're born, and so would discovering something else shatter our entire lives and just create chaos? Gosh, I don't know. And I guess then it would also fall into this question: well, whose job is that to decide? Because at the end of the day, the government's supposed to work for the people. We're supposed to be the one. The government's not supposed to be the one that says, okay. The national security end of it is protecting our own national security. And I
Right.
guess my rebuttal to that would be like, well, is there a foreign enemy or antagonist in the United States that's in cahoots with them? Because this shouldn't be a national security issue if we're
Should be
talking
a
about something.
planetary issue.
Sure. And so, that's a really good question. I don't know. I would love to hear. That's one of these things that I'd love to hear a lot of people's answers from because I don't know that I've ever formed that. I'll be honest with you. My interest in the topic is kind of chasing it or pursuing it. It's never actually this idea that I'm going to figure anything out as to what
I
it
like your take
is.
from a psychology background about the human belief, acceptance, whatever, that there's something else
Yeah,
out there. My take, and I'll just bounce it off you real quick, see what you think, is
sure.
similar, but as I have sat and pondered it, I think that human beings have demonstrated, going back to our earliest history, that we are remarkably malleable, that
Mhm.
we adapt to new systems, new information, new situations, people that have gone through plagues and floods, people that have had hard times, that have been thrust into fame. We don't always do it well. Sometimes we screw up, but people learn to survive new changing conditions. And I think that new information that if there was some non-terrestrial intelligence out there, even potentially vastly more advanced than us, I
Mhm.
think it's a shock at first. I think it sends a shockwave around the world, but I think we adapt.
Sure, I think we adapt, and one of the things that's always beneficial is whether we, you believe it's real or not, but this idea that it's going on, it also inspires innovation. It inspires, well, if they can do it, so does that one day mean we can be interstellar travelers if that's what's going on? I mean, there's no evidence that I've ever seen that if indeed you're talking about some type of extraterrestrial species or something that is malevolent, that it's not, it's never come in like the movie in Independence Day. um, and I agree. If do I think that it'll be the end of civilization? No. Do I think it would change the world? Yes. Do I think it would change our worldview? Sure, but maybe not. That wouldn't be such a bad thing. I mean, we you know
Perhaps not.
yeah, I mean, it's, sometimes getting humbled a little bit and be like, well, we ain't the biggest kids in this giant, vast playground here. Maybe it might be cause us to be willing to get along a little better with each other. Um, I do. I mean, I
Well, I don't know if I'm going to be that much, Mr. Sunshine here, but I think it would change things. And to think that we were the most intelligent and powerful intellect in the entire universe would be just massive, a massive ego trip as far as I'm concerned. I'm about run out of the time that I have. I do want to thank you again. Before we go,
oh, absolutely.
any closing words that you have, but also more to the point, for anybody who perhaps didn't know you before now, where's the best place to find you to keep up with what you're doing?
Sure. Yeah, I have a website which is LT Tim McMillan McMillan.com. So all one word, lttimmcmillan.com. You can, under that same moniker, you can find me on Facebook. I have a public page. You can find me on Twitter. Um, and actually, I always encourage people the same, under that exact same moniker at Gmail, LT Tim McMillan. You can find me at any one of those places. I encourage people to. I get more insight and enjoy chatting with people. I enjoy this. I enjoy it because now, my wife's going to hate you because I'm going to now like sit here and philosophically debate really what would happen if it's aliens. and but that's why I like it. It inspires insight. And so, yeah, but feel free. You may check out websites. I try to keep whenever new articles are posted. But yeah, that Popular Mechanics, Vice, or the War Zone, any one of those spots.
All right, everybody, you've got the man's email address now. You know how to catch up on Twitter. If you have hard evidence that you have been in contact with aliens and have any technology you'd like to show to him, or if you are in fact an extraterrestrial, please contact him and maybe he'll write about you at Popular Mechanics.
Absolutely.
Thank
Be
you again for
happy.
joining us, and have a great day. And I will send you a note when this is going live.
Cool. Sounds good, Jazz. Thanks. Appreciate being
Take
here.
care.